Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick. I'm joined by Justin. How are you, dude?
Yeah, not doing too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, pretty good, man. We've had a bit of a lull in the schedule. No more tournaments to talk about. No more new releases, at least at the time of recording this video. So it's definitely time to get back into way more X-Wing list reviews. So I received a Facebook message the other day from Mr. Lachlan Gillies of the Hell of a Pilot podcast requesting that we do a list review video on the Hawk 290. To which I said, all right, let's do it.
Sure, why not?
I like the Hawk 90 a lot.
Yeah.
It's a good fun ship.
Yeah, and he actually, on the podcast, they were talking about putting Maul on it and calling it the Mouldy Crow.
The Mouldy Crow, yes indeed. A lot of fun.
Such a good name for it.
It's a good name. I don't know if it's a good concept in terms of being a competitive list. But it's something that's worth exploring. Maul is something that's creeping its way into the meta right now with the Ghost. Yeah. But we're not going to talk about Maul today. We're going to talk about the Hawk. And thank you for that suggestion, Lachlan. And thank you for submitting a list. We'll take a look at that in a tick. The Hawk has a special place in my heart because it's part of one of those old 90s Star Wars games that a lot of us played. Dark Forces and Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. Really cool stuff. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it too. And it was basically a clone of Doom, for those of you familiar with that kind of stuff. And then it moved on to Dark Forces 2, where he becomes a Jedi and you've got to use your Force power. It's really good. Sort of like the genesis of things like The Force Unleashed, or Knights of the Old Republic, that kind of style where you build up your force powers and that kind of stuff. If you like classic 90s shooters, definitely check it out. And on the old YouTube channel that me and Justin had, Those Hairy Gamers, we actually did a little gameplay video of that. So I'll actually post the annotation for that here. If you guys are at all interested in me crawling through sewers and getting scared by poo monsters.
Yeah, you freaked out.
Yeah, I freaked out a lot.
Oh, it was good times.
That's before I started making informative videos on YouTube.
Indeed.
Good memories playing that game back in that YouTube Let's Play, and also back in the day when I first had it. In terms of how it was implemented in the game of X-Wing, it was first put on the Rebel faction with Kyle Katarn and Jan Ors, Rourke Garnett, and Rebel Operative, those 4 pilots. And it's interesting because the original way the Hawk was introduced into Star Wars canon was in these Dark Forces games. The idea being that it was a light carrier for the Rebellion, just a good sort of low-profile ship that the Empire wouldn't pick up on. But since then, the EU canon kind of evolved on that, and it turned into a ship that just a lot of like spice runners and traders and bounty hunters ended up using. So not being something that was designed specifically for the Rebellion. And all these different pilots we see, including Rourke Garnett, are previous owners of the Mouldy Crow. We looked at all the scum pilots as well. And
I think there was 4 people that ended up flying the Mouldy Crow at some stage.
Yeah, including Kyle and Jan and whatever. And the ship was eventually destroyed during the events of the computer game Dark Forces 2, where Kyle crashes it. And then he gets a new updated version, which is basically the same thing, but with bigger engines, and it looks dumb. Let's not get into that.
I don't know. I think it looks more like the Firefly ship. And I like the look of the Firefly ship.
Yeah, I guess so. I just wish they went somewhere a bit more original with the design, and it's not the kind of thing I want to see in X-Wing, because I don't want to just see a better Hawk in X-Wing.
No, I agree with that.
So the ship's been around for a very long time, and as such, when the Scum faction was introduced, they added 4 Hawk pilots into the Most Wanted pack. They didn't give us a Hawk model in that pack, but you get the pilot card, so if you buy the Hawk separately, they found a way to sell those old packs, basically. Now, we talked about the fire spray last time, and there was a significant increase on the quality of the ship when it was introduced in the Most Wanted pack. Not so much with the Hawk. It's basically 4 very similar pilots.
Well, sort of the opposite to a certain extent. Like, you had... If one thing was doing one thing, the Scum version did the opposite.
Yeah, I guess the Rebel version's doing the nice version, and the Scum version's doing the scummy version of that thing. Torquil Mux and Rourke Garnett, for example. Rourke Garnett makes a friendly ship PS-12 during a combat phase. Torquil Mux makes enemy ship pilot skill 0 at the end of the activation phase. Very interesting interaction with these cards, actually, is that Torquil Mux always must happen before Rourke Garnett. Meaning that Rourke Garnett kind of wins out in that exchange if they fly against each other, which makes sense. I guess it's more noble to make your friendly ships of a higher pilot score, so that should get priority I suppose. The same thing with Paylob Gordali and Kyle Katarn. Kyle gives friendly ships focus tokens, while Paylob Gordali steals tokens from the enemy. Again, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And we kind of have aggressive versions of the most highest pilot skill pilots in Jan Ors and Dace Bonarm. Jan being able to give one of your friendly ships an extra attack dice during an attack, and Dace Bonarm can inflict more damage when an enemy ship takes an ion token. Not strictly like a mirror version of those abilities.
No.
They both have interesting design space, and what's interesting, despite the fact that all these scum pilots are newer, what we're seeing mostly in any meta play at all is just Jan Ors.
Well, I suppose you look at Jan Ors, she kind of does have the best ability out of all of them.
I agree. I like Jan a lot. PS8's very good, very relevant. You can give her VI to go PS10. Yeah. And also she can boost up ships like Ray, which is really, really powerful. Ray and Jan is not a top tier list by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, people will usually gravitate towards things like Lorik or whatever. But it's fun because you have a big dumb attack with extra blank dice and rerolls and all that kind of cool stuff. It's just a cool idea. I see it a lot at the more casual tournaments, and yeah, I like Jan Ors a lot. We don't actually have a Jan Ors list to talk about, but I wanted to mention that before we got into these.
So the first list by Lachlan has Ezra Bridger with Wired, Gunner, and R3A2.
Captain Rex with Sabine's Masterpiece, Courier Droid, and the Black Market Slicer Tools.
Elo Asti with Veteran Instincts, Flight Assist Astromech, and Integrated Astromech.
I always want to say Atsi, not Asti. I'm really bad at that. And we have Rourke Garnett with TLT and Dash Render. Lachlan, you love your 4 of Rebel builds, don't you, mate?
He's good at them.
He is good at them, that's for sure. And whenever we have a lot of these handshaky things between all the stuff, we really want to make sure that it's not leaning too heavily into one of these ships living, because these concepts are always nice, but when one of those ships dies, that basically enables the entire strategy. It all falls apart, and I don't think this list has done that. I think it's nice and balanced. I really like Rourke Garnett in this list.
Yeah.
Because you're giving either Ezra or Captain Rex targeting priority, or rather you're giving them attack priority in that they'll almost always be the first one to attack. The only instance where Rourke Garnett would not give you the first targeting priority is if your opponent had Epsilon Ace and they had initiative. And that's not going to happen very often, so that's fine. I wouldn't stress about that too much. So basically, Ezra can stress down a ship, potentially tap them twice with Gunner, or Captain Rex could suppress them. I guess the logic there is if they're already stressed, you just hit them with Captain Rex.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward.
Works well.
Absolutely. And I don't think either of those ships suffer too much when Rourke Garnett dies. And that's what I was talking about before.
Yeah.
Ezra and Rex are always pretty solid side by side on any kind of list. I recently flew against an Ezra, Captain Rex, and Ray list.
Ooh.
So basically you're taking out your Elo Asti combination with Rourke Garnett for Ray. A nice big big ship, so you have a bit of control and a big ship to sort of capitalise off that. This list is a bit more grindy. You're going to have to try and play out the game a bit more. Elo Asti is obviously your biggest gun, and that's fine. It's solid. There's nothing wrong with it. And you've got a TLT and dash to make sure you can flank perfectly. I don't really have any criticisms about this. I really wouldn't change anything in this. I'm not a huge fan of Gunner, simply because it can be blanked by so many things and it's 5 points. But it's certainly not a bad option.
Well, I suppose the only other thing other than Gunner and Wired is Snapshot.
Yeah, do you want to go for that classic Ezra build instead? I don't think there's necessarily a right answer to that. You could put Maul on him instead, which would be good fun, but then R3A2 gets rid of Maul. Basically what that would be doing is you'd be R3A2ing, hitting them and taking off the stress, so you'd need your stress attacks to hit. It's a bit too narrow, and I still think Gunner is the better option, even though it costs 2 more points. Yeah, I'm just spitballing here. Like, I'm looking at these things, I'm like, nothing really stands out to me as something that you should be taking out or anything like that.
No.
And I just like the concept. It's really solid. You've focused on Rourke Garnett and making sure that ability gets as much love as possible. And yeah, good list, Lachlan.
And this is by Catherine Nyxsera, long-time commentator here which is nice. Thank you. And we're finally getting around to one of your lists.
Yeah, haven't actually looked at one of your lists yet, Catherine, so thank you for your patience on that. We're taking a look at a couple of generic Hawks this time. And I think with the Hawk, this is one of the best ways to capitalise off it. It is the cheapest platform in the game for TLT. The TIE Aggressor, for example, cost 1 more point at 17, or the most generic Y-Wings cost 18 points. So for 16 points, you can get a TLT on the board, and that feels really good.
Yeah.
And especially with the Scum Hawks, you can just spend 1 more point and get some really nice utility. On one of these Spice Runners, you have Greedo. On the other one, you have Zuckuss. And yes, obviously, this is flown alongside Asajj. I won't spend too much time on Asajj. I've talked about her 1,000 times on the channel now. Expertise, Dengar, Glitterstim, Countermeasures, and Shadowcaster. This is my kind of Asajj build. It's ultra aggressive. It runs Dengar. I love it. Personally, I prefer gyroscopic targeting over countermeasures myself. It's not necessarily the right answer. Glitterstim and countermeasures work so well together. So I definitely wouldn't criticise you for taking that combination if you prefer it. Just on the subject of Glitterstim, though, you do have expertise that does shut off expertise. I'm not a big fan of that myself.
I just noticed that, yeah.
It's why I'd lean into things like Veteran Instincts, or not Predator because you've already got Dengar, not Lone Wolf because you've already got Dengar. I just think about Veteran Instincts and calling it a day. Then your PSA, you have a 2-point bid, and that's really good against things like Miranda Doney, Omega Leader, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, in terms of the EPT, I think there are probably better options, but expertise is still fantastic. Even if you do stress yourself out, you still get the benefit of the attack being good. It's just a bit more on defense, and with countermeasures, nothing wrong with this build whatsoever. Let's focus on these Hawks there, and as I said, it's about having that low-cost TLT platform with the utility. And let's look at the utility you've chosen here. We've got one with Greedo. I love that.
Very spicy.
Well, I made a video a while back on Greedo, and there are two main schools of thought I talked about that. In that Greedo should go on a ship with lots of hull and shields and all that kind of stuff. So the downside of him is not such an issue because you can survive into the late game with him and hopefully benefit more from him than you get downside on your ship. But the other school of thought is you put him on such a low-cost, insignificant ship that still has a decent attack, and you're getting so much benefit out of him. And if your ship dies, well, you go, I don't care. Yeah. It wasn't a really high-priority ship anyway, and that's what you've done here.
Especially with TLT.
Yeah, it's nasty.
It's dirty.
Because you're going to get consistent attacks. And what I love about this is you've got Asajj, which is so good at getting into the fight first, brawling, using Glitterstim and countermeasures to protect herself.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you slow roll this guy behind her and you start TLTing, and you're going to put in face-up damage card with Greedo.
Well, I mean, you look at the dial, and it's definitely going to be flying behind Asajj.
Pretty much. Unless Asajj always does a 1 forward and your Hawk always does a 2 forward, but you don't want to do that.
No. You're not doing
You don't want to do that, not with that amazing Lancer-class Pursuit Craft dial. Absolutely not. The other Hawk has Zuckuss. I don't know how to feel about this. This ship does not handle stress very well.
No.
Theoretically speaking, you could take a stress and just do 2 hards, and then you've got like 1 benefit. Remember, because of this last FAQ that came into effect, you cannot use Zuckuss time after time. You must be able to clear the stress in order to use him again. And I don't think this is the platform to do him. Oddly enough, I think the Lancer is probably a better option for Zuckuss, and the Lancer has better options anyway. Unfortunately, the crew just isn't doing what he used to do.
Maybe Black Market Slicer tools instead?
Yeah, I'd go for Black Market Slicer tools for sure. It works great alongside Asajj. Look, it's not the card that you're going to use every single game, every single turn, but I think it's more relevant more often than Zuckuss.
Yeah.
That's just my feelings on that in general. In terms of crew options, I would think about Intel Agent. I will say, though, that Intel Agent doesn't have a huge amount of value in this list. You don't have any boosts or barrel rolls or bombs or anything like that. But if you were to take gyroscopic targeting on Asajj, for example, it would help you line up the arc a lot better. It would mean you can get that mobile firing arc locked in on your opponent. Even without gyroscopic targeting, you can still do that. And I just think, it's either Black Market Slice Tools or Intel Agent. I think it's one of those two.
Yeah.
There's a case for both. It depends how you want to fly it. I don't think Zuckuss is quite where this wants to be. But I love the concept of this a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of damage.
It's a very cool list.
I mean, I fly Asajj alongside Captain Nim. Is Captain Nim better than two TLT platforms? I don't know. It's really hard to say. I mean, he has a TLT himself, but offers a lot of utility. It's definitely not strictly worse than Captain Nim. And I like the idea. Let's move on to the next list.
Yeah. So this list is by lebverderben, and it has Jake Farrell with auto thrusters, A-Wing test pilot, intensity, predator, and the Shardun refit.
Alongside Nyxsera Dentals with Deadeye fire control systems, extra munitions, advanced proton torpedoes, and guidance chips.
And Karl Katarn with trick shot, twin laser turret, recon specialist, and the Moldy Crow title.
So again, we only have the one Hawk, but the idea is we're capitalising off that Hawk's pilot ability as best we can.
Yeah.
By the way, before we continue, I do want to point out I had several other lists posted with the Hawk on it. I focused on these 4 that we're going to do because they play around with what the Hawk wants to be doing more than other lists. So if you submitted those, I'm sorry. We're getting to the point with these lists that I'm getting so many that I actually can't just do all of them anymore, which is a good thing, a good problem to have. But I'd love to be able to feature all of these. But anyway, that's just my explanation there. So Karl Katarn, he is the focus train. Toot, toot. We have Recon Spec and Moldy Crow. It's definitely like the spicier version of Karl Katarn. Justin just lost it after that.
Oh, god damn.
Thank you for your confidence in my terrible jokes. Recon Spec means you can take 2 focus tokens rather than 1 when you focus. Moldy Crow means you don't lose your focus tokens at the end of the turn. You can still have them stolen or spent or whatever, but you don't clear them off at the end of the turn, and that's really good. Yeah. Really, really good. TLT trick shot, yeah, he's a flanker. Fantastic. Nothing wrong with that at all. And considering his ability works at range 1 to 3, he can still swing out pretty wide and use that.
Yeah.
I like Kyle a lot. He's one of my favourite Hawk pilots. I don't know if he's good competitively, but that's not the point. He's a great casual pilot in that you get a lot of interaction with your board state. You're playing around. It's all friendly stuff. It doesn't create negative play experiences for your opponent. It's all the really high variation, high board state interaction, fun stuff that makes casualists really good.
Yeah.
And that's why I like him a lot. And the 2 pilots next to him are all about the focus token.
Yeah.
Which is perfect.
Yeah, intensity on Jake Farrell means that you can spend it and then use Karl Katarn to flip it back over.
That's right.
Which is handy.
Well, you could theoretically get 2 different tokens. I mean, what does he do at the after perform a focus action or assign a focus token? You may perform a free boost or barrel roll. He loves Karl Katarn, even without intensity. That's crazy. Intensity is another way for him to get a focus token, and if for whatever reason he uses intensity and Kyle the same turn, he doesn't use both those tokens. He can flip intensity straight back up again.
But imagine using a free Can you use 2 boosts in 1 turn?
No, you can't.
No,
but you can boost or barrel roll. Exactly. Yeah. So he could barrel roll, get a free evade, Karl Katarn for a boost. He can do all 4 of those actions in 1 turn. Yeah, could he evade as well? He doesn't need to. He gets tokens regardless.
Yeah.
Jake Farrell is just this ship that can do so many things. I call him the mosquito of aces because that's what he's like on the board. It's really, really annoying to deal with. Only 2 red dice. That's the main thing holding this guy back, and it sucks. I wish he didn't only have 2 red dice. He'd be a seriously powerful ace if that wasn't the case. I like the A-Wing. I like it a lot, but 2 red dice it makes it struggle.
It's just not enough these days.
Well, it kind of plays around the same design space as aces, and aces don't want 2 red dice. I mean, that's just how it is. Anyway, a cool ship. I love it nonetheless. And Nyxsera Dentals, yeah, it's all about that big, juicy, advanced proton torpedo attack.
Yeah.
Can fire at 360, Deadeye to use the focus tokens that Kyle gives her to fire it.
Well, you've also got fire control system if you...
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. So you could still use the target lock in certain scenarios. She could, for example, have 2 focus tokens and a target lock. I think she'd still want to use the focus token in that scenario, though. So, fire control systems, I'm not too sure about. I mean, it's a good upgrade nonetheless if you're just shooting with your primary turn after turn. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Because it means the quality of your primary attacks is still getting way better. And even if you're only doing that with target locks and focuses, that's still really good. I will say, though, I don't love advanced proton torpedoes on this because she's pilot skill 5 and that's really hard to sink those range 1 attacks.
Yeah.
I think just go for proton torpedoes, make it simple, cost 4 points, and it fires range 2 to 3 with 4 red dice. Not quite as juicy. I know you want to do that. You want to use Kyle's tokens to make those eyeball results turn into hits, but it's not going to work, and you're going to feel frustrated about that kind of stuff.
So going down to 97, would you...
Yeah, I'd chuck vector thrusters over on Kyle with those 3 extra points.
Yeah.
That means he can perfectly line up those trick shots, get the positioning right if he just manages to sneak away out of range 3 from his friendlies. I think vector thrusters over there makes a lot of sense. But what I was talking about before with Kyle Katarn and all this kind of stuff, it's really fun for casual stuff. And the way I categorize casual lists in my mind is you want high interaction with all the stuff. You want things to work and trigger all the time. Yep. And that's why I don't like advanced proton torpedoes. Maybe for the spikier, more competitive play, that's the better option, but this doesn't strike me as a spiky competitive list. And that's why I just go for regular proton torpedoes, because you're going to use it very consistently.
Again and again.
And that's it. And after you use that consistently, you still have that great primary attack with fire control systems and all those free focus tokens. And that's really good. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think just toning down the power level just to make it more consistent is the right call to make there. But overall, yep, concept fantastic. 2 aces alongside something that can feed them focus tokens, and they themselves benefit heavily from focus tokens. Makes a lot of sense. Really cool idea, lebverderben.
And the final list is by Innese with Cavill, with Predator, Twin Laser Turret, Bomb Loadout, Extra Munitions, Unhinged Astromech, and Proximity Mines.
We have 2 Hawks this time. One is Pale Goldali with Predator, TLT, and 4 Lom.
And the other is Torkel Mox with TLT and Dengar.
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
I like this a lot. Now, first of all, before we approach this, whenever we have a list with 3 TLT platforms, I always ask myself the question, is this better than a 4 TLT list? Obviously, you have relevant pilots with skills and bombs and crews and all that kind of stuff, so you're spending all those points and taking it away from potentially a 4th TLT platform. You could have 4 Y-Wings or even 4 Hawks. So you're basically saying, okay, this has to overcome that issue of having 1 less TLT shot. Let's start with the Hawks, because that's what we're talking about this time. Pale of Goldali is fantastic. The most popular scum hawk, and there's no question as to why that is. He's the anti-Kyle Katarn. He steals your opponent's focus and evade tokens. Predator, TLT, and 4 Lom. I don't know about 4 Lom. I think 4 Lom's good if you're facing against Unterfell or the Inquisitor, something that has 2 tokens, and you want to try and get through both. But most often than not, you're not going to be facing off against those guys. I think I would go for Intel Agent.
Yeah.
That just feels good. It feels like you can better prioritize your actions. It means the bombing with Cavill is going to be more consistent. You could also think about something like Black Market Slicer Tool, but there's no way to capitalize off it. I don't think there's a whole heap of really good stuff to do here.
No, I don't think Black Market works as well
on
this list as it does with Asajj.
Yeah, I completely agree. Look, I'm splitting hairs here. I just don't think this 4 Lom is really doing a whole heap of work, but the other options aren't great either. We also have Torkel Mux with TLT and Dengar. That's fantastic.
Yep.
I have no complaints about that whatsoever.
Yeah.
I love Torkel Mux alongside 2 other ships with Predator, because the pilot skill 0 hurts.
You also just love Dengar.
Oh yeah, Dengar's fantastic. That's a nice, consistent TLT shot. Very, very fun. Very consistent. Cavill has the extra dice out of Arc, so TLT becomes a bit more consistent with Predator again to capitalize off Torkel Mux. The rest of it's this bomb package with bomb loadout, extra munition, and proximity mines. Obviously, Unhinged Structure, no need to talk about that. Makes the dial amazing. It's pretty much stapled onto these scum Y-Wings. But the bomb package, it's cool. I don't think it's fantastic. You could think about an activation style bomb, like a thermal detonator or a seismic charges. And that would combo well with Intel Agent on Pale of Goldali. It's not amazing, though. You could also think about vectored thrusters instead of extra munitions, and I really like that idea, especially, again, if we're looking at Intel Agent on Pale of Goldali instead of 4 Lom. It means Cavill can better line up his shots. It can mean he's always shooting out of arc. He can potentially arc dodge in some rare situations, and that's good. And yeah, I just think that instead of the extra bomb is probably the right way to go there. Proxy Mine, it's good. You might force your opponent into a bad corridor or something, but it's not... This isn't a bombing list by any stretch of the imagination. So I look at that and go, yeah, you've found some use for your extra points, but it's not insane.
Yeah.
You could also think about putting illicit upgrades on the Hawks, for example. We could use like glitter stims or something like that. But then again, I'm still just trying to fill out points.
The main idea is that you use Torkoal marks to get it to 0, and then you just use Predator. That's the main.
You just hammer them.
Yeah.
And the whole thinking behind that is it's 3 really powerful TLT shots, and that's good.
Yeah.
That's all you want to focus on. In fact, you know what I would do with extra points? I've just thought of this now. Take off Proxy Mine, put on Plasma Torpedoes.
Ooh.
Because it means when Cavill has that shot in arc, he has something that's better than TLT. He can take off the shields, and then your 2 Hawks can just hammer them with TLT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's just
like that.
nice and simple. And it means you have a slightly better Alpha Strike, or also chuck on Guidance Chips, and you've got a great opening gambit.
Oh, yeah, that works good.
For sure. I just don't think Proxy Mine is really where this list wants to be. But I love the concept of just taking something down to Particle 0 and just hammering it with all these really powerful TLTs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good list. Like it.
So that was our 4 Hawk lists.
Yes. Now, from now on, we're going to stick to 4 lists because every time I do 5, 6, or 7, the video goes for way too long. And I've got to keep these nice and succinct. So, sorry guys, there were more Hawk lists to look at, but I have saved those. I've earmarked them for other list archetypes we're going to look at in the future. As always, if you guys want me to have a look at one of your lists, just copy it into the comments of any of these videos and I'll save it onto my document. And I've got a big, it's almost getting up to 50 pages now. It's getting a bit ridiculous.
Also, you can send it to us on Facebook.
Yep, please feel free to do that as well, or Twitter, or whatever. Yeah. I'm happy. I'll work it out no matter where you send it. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Like on Facebook, follow on Twitter, and we'll catch you later.
Bye.